Let's talk about moms being invested in their in-laws' sex life. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I am a licensed therapist. I have been counseling men and women who have been victims and perpetrators of abuse for many years now. I have a question from a commenter. You guys seem to really like these, so I thought I would ask a question. This is an interesting one. Dr. Jones, can you talk about the mother-in-law being overly invested in their son's sex life with their spouse? Yeah, I can. This is an interesting question. But, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind is projection. So whenever someone is super interested in another person's sex life, usually that means that their sex life is lackluster or non-existent. So I would say the first thing would maybe be that you may need to get some. For lack of, she needs to get some. So, when people are, and again, I don't know, when you say overly invested, I also don't know what the level of overinvestment is. So if they're just more or less asking questions and they want to know if their son is having sex, that kind of stuff, just sort of being super intrusive in that way, then yeah, that would be the first thing that comes to my mind, like, some people, depending on culturally, also hyperfixate on sex and whether or not, the in-laws are having sex because they want grandchildren. Like, what are you doing? I want grandchildren. And so they can sort of harp and hound on that. And like, are you guys doing it? Are you, so it could be sort of that thing. And again, I'm just talking about general stuff there. But if it's more or less like, if a person is wanting details and, they're wanting to know everything, I would say the next possibility that I would say is there may be, if they're wanting more explicit details on what you guys did and what position and all of this other kind of stuff, I would then say that, perhaps they are, vicariously living through your sex life, so they may be sort of vicariously fantasizing about that. Those would be the first few things that I would hope that, or maybe it might fall into that category, because those are like, it's inappropriate, but at least it's not, as sinister as like the next alternative, which would be like, if someone is overly invested in what you're doing and they kind of want a blow by blow every time that you guys do it and they need to know and they get super jealous and all of this other kind of stuff, then it could be something a little bit more sinister, such as abusive, sexual history of sexual abuse, or, that could be one thing, but there can also be being overly enmeshed. A good example of overly enmeshed mother-son and mother-daughter relationships would be the show Smothered. So Smothered shows like where the moms wanted to know everything and they kind of wanted to dictate everything in their children's lives that got married, especially when it came to their sons. So that could also be another element of it too, is wanting to control and dictate what's going on in the son's life. And some mothers get, it's something about those boy moms, when their sons get married. And this is especially true for foreign or immigrant mothers. They are very close with their sons, and they don't believe that any woman is good enough in any capacity. And so these mothers become hyper fixated on wanting to control their sons. And I think a lot of it is they want to mold their boy into the man that they wished that they could have married. And so they, nothing's ever good enough. And so they're going to intervene at every twist and turn. The only way they can stop doing that is if the son draws a hard line. So the son would have to draw a hard boundary and say, you know what, that's none of your business. We're not doing that, and that's inappropriate. So they have to set a firm boundary, but they could be very temperamental. Mother-in-laws can be very temperamental and have a tantrum, but I think this could be an example of a mom that wants too much control, doesn't want to detach. She's having a hard time detaching from that relationship, and mothers do romanticize their sons. They idolize them and put them on a pedestal, and their son can be a super god in a lot of cases. And I've seen it firsthand how that can happen. And their boy could be the worst criminal on this side of the earth, and their mothers will, pop him up on a pedestal and say that boy is better than Jesus himself, So there's some of that, but you can also check in and see if there's any history of abuse. But this is also also probably where everyone in this situation is being triangulated: the wife, the son, and the mother. And so as the wife, you have to sort of step up in, set your rank, set your standard, and put everything in check. Now, if you can't check it, then that's probably going to give you a sign of how things are going to go for the rest of the relationship. If you have not been able to have your husband or, whomever set that boundary, that's typically not a good sign, because there does need to be some level of privacy within the couple's relationship, some level of intimacy, some level of, whatever, where, outsiders, mother-in-laws and things like that, there just needs to be that. And regardless of if a son was super close, with his mother and may tell them things like that, I would draw the line there. The other dynamic, the last dynamic that I will mention that, that I have seen with men who are on the down low, or secretly gay. So they're married and they live a heterosexual lifestyle with their wives. But they also secretly have had sexual affairs with men that their wives know nothing about. Now, with these types of men, I have seen them be super enmeshed with their mothers. They will often undercut their wives, and they will also be overly explicit in telling their mothers everything about their life with their wives. And again, that sort of, it's almost kind of like throwing the wife under the bus, creating the conflict. And while the two women in his lives are busy with each other and busy being pissed off, he can kind of do his stuff in the dark without even being noticed, because they're too busy fussing and fighting and being pissed off with each other that they're not noticing, when he slinks out the back door and goes to visit a man. So that is the last dynamic that I'm familiar of. And so all those scenarios are very different. And you guys let me know in the comments if you think there could be anything else going on that maybe I didn't mention or forgot to mention. But definitely follow, comment, and share. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. Thank you so much.